Hi, my name is Erin DeFort, and I am with the SnoValley Chamber of Commerce. And every election, we do a candidate forum to introduce our candidates to our voters. And so today we have with us Representative Lisa Callan with the 5th District running again for position 2. So I'd like to give you a few minutes just to introduce yourself, tell the voter a little bit about what your priorities are this time.
Sure. Thank you very much. It's such an honor to be here, and thank you to the SnoValley Chamber for putting on this opportunity. You usually get to do it in person, right? And now that we've got expanded districts and all of that work representing you, I really appreciate the format that you're bringing forward. And it has been my sincere honor and pleasure to serve this district for the last 4 years. I'm very excited to run again for re-election. You know, I've always been very deeply committed to being engaged in community and making sure that we've got people that are connected, and our neighbors and our residents and our businesses and our schools all have the ability to thrive. And they do that when we're all connected and we're all engaged and we all care. And when I had my son and started to jump back into some of my education roots from my family growing up, it's kind of jumped back into my volunteerism in schools and just brought my business experience and my engineering experience, and knew that I could help make a difference on bringing a solid education and a solid well-being, taking care of the whole child to our school systems. And that's when I ran for the school board, and then had the opportunity to run for the legislature and continue to serve in that capacity. So as I've done the work, and as we're in the middle of our issues right now in our communities, I think the one thing I always just want to stay top of mind is staying very grounded and connected to community. That means being out, having deep conversations with everybody, making sure those voices that don't have access to government necessarily have a chance to say how life is showing up on their doorstep. And I think for me, I mean, the issues that we want to bring forward and make sure in terms of priorities for this upcoming session definitely include making sure our neighbors can thrive. We still have a lot of folks that are out there struggling post-pandemic, making sure that we can take care of all of them, making sure that we have the public safety investments that we need so that people feel safe in their neighborhoods, feel safe calling police and first responders, and they all have the tools that they need, making sure that we have housing and access to affordable housing, making sure our schools can continue to bring forward, you know, top quality, rigorous education that allows our youth to compete on, you know, the global environment that we have today, but also do that making sure that we're taking care of their whole being and all the aspects that are required for them to be able to learn. So I want to make sure we're focusing on that. And, you know, and of course, being with the chamber and going through the pandemic and attending weekly meetings and understanding the impacts that the pandemic had on our small businesses, and working with Senator Mullet to really make sure that we had ways to reduce restrictions and continue to push forward. And we have this bumping up against the recession work that we have to do to make sure that we're going to keep our businesses whole and keep them in an ability to not only recover, but to continue to thrive and grow. So these are all priorities for me, and I'm anxious to continue to serve and anxious to talk to you more about.
Okay, so we are going to ask Representative Callan 3 questions, and she has not heard these questions before. The first one is, as Washington moves toward a future of only non-carbon emitting energy, how do you balance the growing need for electricity with the reliability of the grid?
We certainly have to strengthen our grid, and we have to make sure the power sources are there, right, to make sure that we have stable, reliable power. We can't allow our homes to go dark. We can't allow our businesses to go dark. And making sure that we've got that capacity is got to be there. And I support making sure that that happens. So working with our power partners, working with clean, that's what I'm trying to say. Clean energy partners, and figuring out what we need to do to actually make sure we have the robust availability to meet the demands that are not only here today, but are going to be growing, and having a way to forecast that demand as we're going forward, as we move, you know, more and more away from carbon emission based, and moving to electricity. We have to be very rigorous about that. With my engineering background, being on vice chair of capital, working hard on making sure we have that infrastructure built out is one of our top priorities. Make sure we make those investments. We started them in the previous years, and we need to make sure that we continue to do that. And I will start with the data, and I will make sure that we're working from that. We had a bill that moved forward last year from this bipartisan bill across the aisle with Representative Mossbrucker that brought forward this need to make sure, I think it was Mossbrucker, to make sure that we had, what are the demands that we need to make sure that we weren't going to have be at risk of rolling blackouts, for example, or brownouts, and and all of that. So, from my perspective, we need to gather all the data that we need to make sure that it's strong and stable.
Okay, our next question is, what role, if any, is there for the state legislature to ease growing concerns about affordability with housing prices, fuel prices, and inflation?
Oh yeah, there's certainly we have to partner, with with Congress and our federal legislators and the work that they're doing and working to try to combat this on a national level, certainly, and then work closely with our cities and our counties and our partnerships about how we actually really pay attention to what's happening not only in the pocketbook of every resident so they can afford their medicine, their food, their gas, right? But then also understanding what the impacts are to our state systems and services and supports, right? I mean, it does not go cheaply to put gas in a school bus to get our kids to school every day, and that is a huge impact on our ability to operate our schools and not run into a budget deficit. So, from my perspective, in particular, to address housing, for example, there's 3 areas that we really have to kind of look at. We have to look at supply, we have to look at stabilizing existing affordable housing, and what does that look like and mean, and then subsidize and bring incentives from the state government. That's a role that we can play in making sure that we can incentivize and partner with our cities and our counties to create more supply and create sustainability in the existing affordable housing. And then partner with not only cities and counties, but also with our with philanthropy, with our private partners. We have great partnerships with Habitat for Humanity, for example, that has a development that's growing right now in North Bend, just a block away. Very excited to help provide some funding for that through the Housing Trust Fund and building out those strategies. There's a whole other plethora of ways that we can do it. The more we can support our cities and our counties in building out the kind of communities that they want, that has this full balance of continuum of housing and affordability and accessibility, is to provide like infrastructure support. So the sidewalks, the sewer, the hookups for going towards an affordable housing. That's a great incentive for cities because they don't have they don't have extra budgets to be spending. And when they do, they want to be able to spend it on the services and needs that their community needs. But they also want to bring affordable housing to their community so that you can bring a workforce, to carry for your businesses and do all of that work. So, I think that's an example where when the state can come in and have a solid public works account and have a solid, like a grant program that we stood up in the last 2 years that provides an ability for a city to apply for the infrastructure grants to pay for that type of work. It's not out of pocket, but it's for the city, but it's a partnership that then brings together and incentivizes continuing to bring that wealth of continuum services and supports.
Okay, for our third question, Washingtonians have become increasingly concerned about community safety, as you mentioned earlier. What steps can the legislature take in this area?
Well, I think one of the very first things that is so important, and I'll go back to my introduction statement, is making sure that we're doing deep listening and we're engaging everybody in this conversation. I am hearing it across the business communities, across the residents, their concern for community safety and public safety, and certainly working with law enforcement over this last year, making sure that we're bringing investments to bear that helps add more tools to the toolbox. For example, for the Snoqualmie Valley, I worked hard to bring funding so we could hire a behavioral health navigator that works with the police department that covers North Bend and Snoqualmie, to bring the behavioral health resource needs to help offload that work and integrate services and supports on the demands for our police. We also wanted to increase training so we have more access to police officers and they can not spend all their time trying to recruit and retain officers, but actually have a full staffed force. I think those are areas that we have been working on and have funded and need to continue to do, and that means expanding training services across the state. And also, I think specifically for communities here in Snoqualmie Valley, as you really dive in and you look at what's happening and what's necessary and needed, we need to figure out how to provide, again, those toolboxes for our businesses. So if you have retail theft going on, how can we offer up and what can we do, whether it's grant programs, whether it is training, whether it's technical assistance, what can we do to help support and bring to bear like environmental design and all of the different aspects that can help you as a business without it being out of pocket on top of retail loss to try to help figure out a better way to deter crime to begin with. So that only happens when you're getting engaged deeply and you're having those conversations with community. I think really understanding what boots on the ground is like for police officers as they're trying to address community theft, property theft. We have an increase in property theft. We have an increase in vehicle theft. And unfortunately, we have an increase in homicides across the state. And that is reflective of what we're seeing across the nation. And so as we try to bring more tools to bear to really work into that, then we find out, what's not working and what we need to change and what we need to work on and move forward. Part of the conversation over the last 2 years and action the legislature has taken is to respond to those that have traditionally not had a voice in community safety and how they feel safe. And what does that mean when they call a first responder? So my goal is to make sure that we have that strong partnership that lifts every voice, and our policies and our funding comes to bear to provide more funding, more tools, not taking anything away, not reducing the ability to serve and protect, but also making sure that we've given our first responders every tool that they need, that they have the ability to stay safe, and that our community can stay safe.
Okay, we're going to wrap this up, and I'm going to give you one question that you can answer, and then you can give us any final thoughts.
Okay.
If you had the ability to pass one piece of legislation this coming session, what would it be?
One piece of legislation. Wow, that's a tough question. Certainly, one of the areas that I am diving in full on and with every bit of my fiber and trying to support our communities is the high need around behavioral health and the continuum of care of services that we need to support. When you talk about housing, when you talk about public safety and community safety, when you talk about all of these issues that we have in front of us, there's an intersection that gets connected to people's health and well-being and where we are. And right now in Washington State, right now in King County, specifically King County, which means our neighborhood right here, right? There is no place for a person that is having a behavioral health crisis to go except for the emergency department or to interact with police. When you're having a behavioral health crisis, what you need is health care, and you need supports around that, and we need to make sure that we're connected. So we need to build out, and this is something that has been my drive in talking with Chief Phipps with the Snoqualmie Police Department, is how do we support you in your first response to better serve in that capacity? And that's why we went and, I worked hard to get the funding for that position. But beyond that, we have to have more. We have to have a depth of service that's accessible and reachable, affordable for all community members, for the workers that are trying to come to work every day, but they're worried about their child who maybe is depressed or refusing to go to school today. We got to have it for our schools. We got to have that built out. So how do we build out that behavioral health continuum of services everywhere from the very beginning of promotion and prevention and well-being, all the way through that early intervention. And so you have a place to go. You can get the resources that you need or somebody in your family needs when and where they need it, in a way that can be received and accessed. And then that takes the relief off of our police departments. It takes the relief off of our emergency departments and lets them get to their core services. And so as I've started in that work, I need to continue in that work, and we need to continue to push hard because I think it hits so many of these other issues.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah.
So again, this is Representative Lisa Callan. She is running again in position 2 with the 5th District. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity.